All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's call on it's actually a tutorial, a vibe coding tutorial. And it is the first call that is brought to you by, hosted by the Decentralized AI Agent Alliance. I think most of the people on the call are from the Alliance. We did send some invites out to folks, who are part of the broader Crypto Mondays community, who are not part of DAIAA. And so just real quick for those who are not familiar with DAIAA, uh, uh, the Decentralized AI Agent Alliance, our mission is to foster the development and proliferation of decentralized AI agents through education, activism, research, and events. We had our first meeting in February, and we're now more than 125 founding members. So you can go take a look at everybody on our logo page. And we have about 25 of the members are members as individuals, and so everybody's welcome to join. There's no costs. If you want to join as an entity, project, company, just send us your logo. We'll add it to the logo wall and come to a few meetings. And if you get value, you'll continue to come. And if you don't, we're happy to take the logo down. Most of the work at the Alliance gets done in subgroups. We're now two more. And the subgroups, it's kind of like Crypto Mondays. We're decentralized. Anybody can start a subgroup if there's a problem, or issue that they want to solve. And there are other members of the Alliance, who also want to solve that issue and they'll join. And so got a number of quite active subgroups going and more starting. And it was actually last week, I was on the legal matters subgroup call, and Adam Miller was talking about some vibe coding that he was doing. And it was super interesting conversation, and other people talking about the vibe coding that they were doing, and then people started asking questions, and it really seemed like a large percentage of the call was spent on vibe coding because it was so interesting and so many people were interested in it. And so that's really what sparked the call today. Because I figured, if the legal matters subgroup, was enjoying it so much and found it so interesting, so would the broader alliance as well as people outside the alliance. So once again, thank Adam for joining us today and kind of leading the conversation. But there'll be others, will also chime in. And again, it's an open call, so anybody should feel free to chime in. If too many people are chiming in, we'll move to raising hands. But until then, feel free to chime in if you have a thought or question that you'd like to add. And before I turn it over to Adam, just real quick, just to level set anything, right? It's a vibe coding tutorial. So just so we're all on the same page, what does vibe coding even mean? So if you type it into Google, the response you get is vibe coding refers to a programming approach that heavily relies on AI-powered tools and natural language prompts to generate and debug code. So instead of manually writing code, programmers describe their desired functionality in natural language, and the AI tool handles the code generation, testing, and debugging. Seems pretty pretty sick. That we'll all hopefully soon, I'm not quite sure immediately after this call, but soon, be able to build the projects that we want. So, I'm super excited to learn about it and to turn the floor over to Adam.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me share my screen. And do you want me to go for a certain amount of time, or just kind of go in and out and leave time for discussion?
Yeah, I mean, generally, kind of we ask like when folks come and talk like on a panel to talk for like 8 or 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. Sounds great. All right. All right. Do you guys see my whole screen?
What can I help with?
Awesome. Okay. So to give a little context, right, I was a programmer and software developer as a teenager, all the way through my freshman year of college. And since then, I haven't done serious development and programming, right? I've always hired other people to do it for my companies.
So it's interesting. Would you still consider yourself a programmer?
Now I do, again, after the last few months.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah.
before that, during that long interlude.
It was one of those things where I would kind of tell people it depends, or say, yes, I'm a programmer, but not like the real programmers. you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it's a combination of, yeah, obviously lack of practice. But I mean, think about all the knowledge you don't get when you're not a CTO or a software engineer over the course of 20 years. You
Sure.
know, I mean, everything from big computer science concepts like the most efficient way to build things to really simple things like just what are the right functions to use for something uh, and how to learn a new language, or learn many new languages and platforms at once
Sure.
to
No,
build
look, since
something
I
new.
was coding in college, my understanding is now they no longer use computer cards.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we're finally past that. And now we're at AI, which, you know, yeah, I've gone from the CEO of my company to our CEO and CTO because we don't have the budget. We don't want to raise money right now uh, to hire, or we don't want to pay our tech team anymore. It's like $50 to $100 an hour, no matter what. And I have some time because I've done a good job getting the rest of the team to run the business. And so I'm becoming our CTO now, literally. I mean, building our
And I
entire
assume it would
system.
also help you understand your own company better.
Yeah, it's probably true. Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways it's, you know, it's obviously it's changing how I manage and changing how we do things. But also my whole team is using AI now constantly, right? It's almost like no task, almost no. I'm not happy unless I'm only using AI because there's so much leverage, right? I could be writing this much, or I could be writing this much that turns into this much. But again, I think that's a separate issue, right? I think we're all kind of excited about that. You know, what I want to show is how have I gotten to the point that I'm actually building apps, and it ranges as someone who hasn't in, you know, over 20 years. And it ranges, even though I used to, right? It ranges from pure like web-based interface, which I'll show you a couple apps I built, to actually working in an IDE, which if anyone doesn't know, that's like the software that software developers work on their computer for the most part. Integrated, has everything you need to build
What
with.
does it stand for?
Integrated development environment. Actually, this is an integrated development environment. This is actually Cursor, which is one of the AI integrated development environments. But what I'll show you, and actually this is the Cursor part over here, where you talk to the AI and have it build stuff or talk to you. But I'll get to later, I'm using Claude Code now. Probably, I'm not the only one. But Cursor is the IDE. It's actually built on VS Code. Technically, this is an open source IDE called VS Code, managed by Microsoft. Same people who do GitHub, which is another key kind of tech tool for developing. Uh, and then, so
Open
Cursor
source
built on
tech
top
tool.
of what?
Oh, right. Git source it is open source. GitHub.
GitHub is source control,
Yeah.
open or closed. Yeah, and actually, there may be even more closed code on there now, open. It's just a way of managing your code and versioning. Uh, so, so this is Cursor, which is one of the best AI vibe coding IDEs built on top of VS Code. And then I added something else called Claude Code on it. But I want to just take one step back, okay? I think you all probably know you can just go to ChatGPT and say, write me code for a single page web app template or something, right? And it'll just do it, okay? And that's nice, right? But as you can imagine, this requires you to know exactly what to ask for. And then you need to copy and paste it places. And then it says, look, do this, right? Half you on the call probably have no idea what this means. Let me zoom in a little bit. And so this is not, now you could then go say, well, what does NPM mean?
Uh-huh.
Right? And go step by step, fine. Okay. And that's what all the, you know, AI tools will help you do. And increasingly they're trying to even get to the point that they can do more. Um, but then, you know, to take it to the next level, you go to something like Lovable, which I definitely recommend trying out. We recently went to production, replacing our website of 3 or 4 years with this new website that I made on Lovable. Lovable is awesome because it's really good at making beautiful front end lead generation websites, right? There's obviously, it still integrates with the database. Um, Now, this is like the easiest vibe coding there is that I've come across for a non-technical person. Highly recommend you try it. Everything happens in the chat. It will never even show you file structure, right? If you're brave, you can go up here to dev mode and see the actual code and edit it. But it's really made even for people who don't want to do that. Now, what I found is even to launch this production
And so
website,
you're on the
exciting,
Lovable
I think.
website.
Sorry?
You're on the Lovable website now.
Lovable.dev. Yeah, but you can go
Yeah.
see this at MIDAO.org also if you want. That's our website now, right? Now, in Lovable, I got this website looking just like this. And then it turned out there were some things I couldn't do without moving to an IDE. Okay. So for example, Lovable has its own built-in kind of like testing that it does before launch. But if you want like top of the line, thorough, modern software testing for a website, which you do if you're a 4-year-old business with hundreds of customers or whatever, right? At some point you do. I don't think Lovable actually quite gets you there. So stuff like a lot of images were uncompressed. So it was going to be slow. Even though it thought it had optimized for SEO, there was a lot of stuff missing SEO related in addition to images. So I had to go to my IDE. Okay, this again is a whole step up from that type of vibe coding. But let me actually show you another thing that's in between. Okay, because the IDE probably looks very complicated. Well, in Replit, which is like the next step up from Lovable, it's halfway between like pure vibe coding with a chat and actually exposing you to some of the more technical elements. So it's less restricted. It actually shows you the files here on the left. Let me zoom in again. Right? You can click on them and do stuff with them, upload, download, but still it's built so that you can do everything from the chat. This is a newer chat. And they even built in, like, they have a database, they have user auth built in. So you can actually see, like, I'm the only user of this app so far. And this app I made to walk me through my dog's pregnancy. She's 5 weeks out of 8 weeks pregnant. And so you can see day 39, I can log things.
Yeah, and people should be aware, right? You travel with your dog.
Not while she's pregnant, but yes.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of
Yes,
people.
yes.
Yeah, and she actually can't even see her in this picture. And it has everything. It has the, and by the way, so the way I made this, and I want to go into this, because like this is actually a key to doing anything with AI that you're not an expert in already. And I use this for both of these websites I just showed you, is you got to start with deep research or some kind of really high quality AI output. Okay. O3 is probably the starting point for something like this, but ideally use actual deep research. And that's a conversation for another day. You want to write to help me write a prompt to get a deep research AI to write up a detailed report on modern web development best practices, or modern UI UX design best practices, or modern, whatever it is you're trying to do. First go here. And then you say, how do I write a good spec for a website? Okay. Now with AI back and forth, you're going to have the research that shows you how to make a great website, maybe some competitive analysis, maybe like in my case for MIDAO, I uploaded a version of all of our documents, right? Like our latest content about MIDAO, how to make a great website, etc. I put all of that into Replit or Lovable, right? Before I start or as I'm starting, I say, please reference this document, which has modern web design best practices. Please reference this document, which has all the information about MIDAO and the way we like to communicate it. Now make us a single page website. Okay.
So from a step by step, so you started on the MIDAO example, you created it in Lovable, and then to enhance it, you moved it to
I also editing it from an IDE because you can do both at once. And that's true for all of these, because all of these interact, pretty much all of these tools, I think all I'm aware of, interact with GitHub, the thing I mentioned earlier, which stores and versions and backs up your code. And so Lovable actually is a little different. So with Lovable, you both integrate with GitHub, but Lovable always pulls down and pushes up the latest GitHub. Other tools, you interact with GitHub and you can choose if you want to take the GitHub and put it to your live project, but it's a small nuance. So like here, you'll see sometimes a step that says that I edited the code instead of
Alex.
Just a quick question, Adam. So if I'm on Squarespace, for example, is there a way to connect with Squarespace?
Yeah, and you can literally say with my Squarespace account, because that's one of the things AI is really good at, is it just knows about all the stuff, right? Like it can look for the Squarespace module that Squarespace probably built for websites to integrate Squarespace into it. I mean, we'll see what it says. By the way, another just quick tip is it can be really helpful to ask the AIs to plan first, and then look at the plan, and then execute the plan. And actually, I want to go pretty quickly because I want to show you guys one more thing during my section. And you can see, right, this didn't actually know about Squarespace necessarily. but it'll walk you through it, and it'll say, okay, copy and paste your API key here, do this, and I'm sure Replit will be good at interacting with, but they also have their own e-commerce thing, I think. Even not positive about that, but yeah, you definitely can. And then let me go to the, and I'll keep Squarespace in mind as I do this. I just want to do the IDE also, because this is the ultimate. And I know, and then, but this took a couple months to get here, right? And I worked in IDEs before, but like it took time to get to this point, because now you're really, look, Claude is basically in the terminal. You're working in a terminal. I don't know if you guys know about terminal. You probably recognize it from movies. Anyone who doesn't, right? Terminal is where it's all text. So this was a Claude I was running, Claude code. And actually, this was an interesting one, because I was just asking it to help me write some SQL to help me migrate some columns in my database. But let me show you in IDE, okay? In an IDE, you have your AI over here on the right. You can put it in ask mode, which is like a discussion, or agent mode. I don't actually know what manual does. And then here, you can choose your model. Now, this is a really important thing. Once you go beyond Lovable and Replit, where they don't expose what models they're using, when you get into Cursor, for example, you can choose your model. And now in the settings, I've disabled all the ones I don't want to use. And I even have a local AI model here. You kind of have to get to know which AI model is good at what. And especially when you start running into bugs and stuff, which AI model is best at resolving bugs. Right? The other thing that gets very advanced is you have to think about how much information do you want it to look at. So you could say, review my whole project, right? And it does its best. But as you probably heard with AI, or no, everyone here probably knows, they don't have long context windows. So sometimes when the project gets really complicated, you just have to say, review, this file and these lines of code, right? You could like select this and then put it into the chat. Right? Oh, there, so you put it up here. But the last thing I want to show you with my time is Claude Code, because I don't know if this came out last week or if they just came out with the new models last week and everyone was talking about it. But Claude Code, which is another thing you add to your IDE, or like I showed, run in the terminal, it's by far the best of anything I've seen. I think a lot of people are saying this. I know people have their preferred tools, and if you're halfway through something, maybe you're not switching. But I'm hearing a lot of people say this Claude Code, you can choose between their two latest models, default, which is great, or Opus, which is insane and costs 5 times as much. And by the way, you can pay either, you can do their monthly plans, you can pay per request, there's different ways to do it. So I'll just do default because it's also faster, and I'll put it in planning mode, and we can do anything. And this is actually our live website, so I'm not going to touch it right now, although it'll be easy to reverse. But what I've been working on now is just like migrating something in the database to use these new compressed images rather than the old images. And so I have my utility where I'm messing with like crawling my website and getting all the images out and stuff like that, and just walking through, no, it needs to be the exact file name. No, it needs to be in this folder. No, it needs to not miss some because it's being prevented from scraping the site by this. It still needs to scrape it. What's the solution, right? Keep going. And by the way, that's the experience with a lot of this stuff. And I've heard a lot of people call vibe coding AI pair programming, because pair programming is a really common thing in the world of programming where two people sit there and work together, and you end up solving more problems. And so one question people are asking, well, is AI pair programming better than regular pair programming? It's like, well, clearly for a lot of use cases, because the AI is so fast, right? And it knows some things so much better than anybody than I do. But it's still a good way to think about it. And the other thing that's amazing, right? And just to give you like some of the I guess the downsides ahead of time. Some people see these downsides and like, oh my God, vibe coding doesn't work. But it's like a person. It makes mistakes. It literally, less and less, it has typos. That was even 6 months ago, it's like typos all over the place with AI. Now they're not so much making typos, although I still see it, but you still run into bugs, and then you got to go fix the bugs. It's just like a traditional development experience, just way, way, way faster and plugging in a lot of gaps for you.
Well, so thank you very much for that. So a lot to take in. Yeah, let me start, and I think it's anybody wants to ask a question, raise your hand, and I'll ask a couple and then take them in the order received. But yeah, I think certainly for me, and I assume for other people on the call, like, okay, yeah, it's really time to start doing this. What we should just like to get off the dime, just to start with, right?
Lovable. You should
Yeah.
start with Lovable, and let me just show you their homepage. So it literally all these the tool Lovable and Replit start with a box, right? And it doesn't even let you upload images or information the first time. So you start simple, start right here, and it's even free to start. And then I think once you've done that, you can decide if you want to try. Wait till you run into something you can't do. Try to make anything you want here, I'd say. You'll run into especially if you're making something super interactive, you'll run into a challenge and you'll be like, okay, maybe I'll try Replit. By the way, you can also just try 2 or 3 at once. I'll do 2 or 3 monitors with Lovable, Replit, IDE, and give them all this really nice prompt I've been working on. Here's the deep research, optimized for AI, right? If it was super long or whatever the relevant parts are. Here's my old website. Here's my colors. Here's the modern web design best practices. Here's a spec for what I'm trying to build. Please go build the MVP or V1 of it, or go this far down it and put it into 3. And then, by the way, you're also sitting there saying, yes, yes, continue. Yes, try again. Yes, fix the bug. Yes, yes, yes. But again, still, it's great. It's nice. But you still do that.
You know, I mean, it seems like the easiest thing to do when you run into any kind of problem is just ask the AI itself.
Yeah.
But from an educational standpoint, is there any place else that you go to learn about this? YouTube videos or
I've started to find some really good ones. Let me put them in the chat when the next person's speaking. I'll find some of my favorite resources because I don't think I even have really great ones yet, but I've started to find some. And then Andy even, send me some. Maybe he'll share some. But for a while now, I've been like really trying to find who are the other people going through the same journey, and I've slowly been finding them. And then it's really nice to have people to like bounce ideas off of. Hey, have you tried this? And what's the latest thing? Yeah.
Cool. Maybe Andy, you want to talk for a few minutes to add on to anything, and obviously give folks your background because you probably have a deeper programming background than Adam.
Yeah, I come at it from a different angle than Adam because I've probably written a million lines of code, and and that that affects my work probably in a negative way. So I aged out of it. You can see how old I am. And when I was a kid, like when I was 18, 19, 20, I was the best programmer in the world. I was the best programmer at Harvard, and because I had this photographic memory. And I remember once reading the manual for a new programming language. It was Perl. And then when I got to the last page, I just threw it away. And that's really important for programming because you remember where stuff is in a big code base. And one time my boss called me. This is many, many, many years ago, but he said, I have this problem. And I literally said, well, go to 9,999, right? I was in the middle of the night. I was lying in bed and check the semicolon, stuff like that. So, but AI can do that, right? So now, you lose that working memory, or you can't do it if you start running companies. I've run 3 SaaS companies since then. I stopped programming. But that AI now, they have these large contexts. And that's what Adam was saying, is that you can just drop in all your research and all your code. You have to start being a little careful, right? That's the first phase, is you sort of give it everything, and then you have to trim it back so it gets less confused. But it can actually do, replace the brain that, the photographic memory. But when I say it's affected my work in a bad way, I still try to do too much of the thinking myself. So the way that Adam describes using the AI is actually better, which is anything that you want to do, first ask the AI. You have a question. Do you want to write a plan? Do you want to know what tools to use? Do you want to scan your website and get all the data off of it? Push it, spend 15 minutes pushing it and try to get it from the AI. I don't do that enough, but in time box it. Try to get it from the AI. If it doesn't work in 15 minutes, AIs have sort of this thing where they can handle probably more complexity than you, but then it falls off a cliff and they don't work at all. And that same thing is true with vibe coding. Go to Lovable or Bolt or VNA, right? I've used all three of them in the past week, and try to get it to spit out something. If it gets caught in a buggy loop, or if you say, hey, cursor, make me a node application, and it gets caught, it'll pretty frequently right at the beginning get caught in a bug loop. Just start over. Just move on. And so there's a couple of dynamics that I've noticed with this. One is that you tend to start from simpler pieces rather than starting from, you go out and look for an open source application. For instance, I'm building an AI client that can do anything you want to do in DeFi.
Yeah.
It's a complicated task because it's actually at the leading edge of what we want to do with AI, which is we'll have thousands of these MCP tools that represent smart contracts, and we have to sort through. The phase of AI we're in now is dumping these big batches of tools, and now we have to sort through and figure out, well, how do we go from thousands to 20, which is what the AI can absorb, and so we're on the leading edge of figuring that out to make this, you know, universal UI work. We have a choice of starting with open source clients that do a lot, or starting with like a demo and building up. And with the AI coding, you probably have an incentive to start with the smaller thing and build up, because it's pretty easy to add stuff, but it's also pretty easy if you start with a big piece of code to get caught in the debugging loop that doesn't work. Another thing that I noticed is that when you can use these vibe coding tools, these prepackaged ones, like Adam was showing, Replit and Lovable, for things like a database application, what my guys tend to do is I'm really good at databases because I'm old. I'm from the 90s, and that's like a superpower from the 90s. They'll tend to look at my data structure and throw it away and just go make a new app that's better. So you'll get that. That's not really, wasn't really an expected behavior, but probably a good behavior in the AI era. So, and also we're in like a weird.
Why is that a good behavior in the AI era? The just database. I have a database mind as well. So databases are inefficient. There's a better way. Like what's better than
Well,
database?
it's always been true, and it's still true, that you'll define a database and that'll be kind of a fixed point, but you'll add apps around it. It's just going to be much more common that you throw the app away.
Okay.
And start a new one. That's not the expected behavior, but we're in the middle of a transition from having database.
So you still have to protect your database so it doesn't get corrupted and messed up, because you're going to throw lots of apps at it.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think you still have an incentive, like back from the old days, to make a relational database that has rules. It's annoying, but that, you know, is a proven way of sort of building something that you can put apps around it. So now we're in a transitional state where until about 6 months ago, you would make a database app and then you would just use it. And now what we're seeing, the behavior I described from my guys is I'll make a database app and they'll throw it away and make another database app. That's a transitional behavior to where we're going to be a year from now, which is there is no database app. We just talk to the AI, and it makes the views and, you know, data entry and everything that we need on the fly. And that's actually one of the things we're trying to put in, one of the modes we're trying to put into our, you know, our next gen AI client. So, and we're also in this weird transitional state from not using AI coding tools to using a whole bunch of them. Like, we're pretty common. You heard me and Adam say that we had tried a bunch of these even in the last week or two, to probably having that stabilize. The stabilization may again be this, I don't know how long it's going to take to get there, but it'll be this universal UI that is the one AI that does all the database stuff you want, but it can also write code to do that stuff. And then you can imagine it sort of saving the code, right? And now you have self-generating apps.
Maybe I could, Andy, can I build a little bit on what you're saying? Because I definitely find something similar. And to me, it may be more because I'm a beginner again than even because of AI. But it seems like, okay, but throughout all my AI projects, the beautiful thing is you always get to see the end, even once you've just started. Okay. I think if you apply that to coding, it puts you into the exact situation that you said, which is if I don't know everything I need to put into my prompt, and then 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh shit, you got to do the database first and separately so that you really have control over it and the AI doesn't screw it up. And I haven't run into that specific one, but the AI seems to be okay with my database, although you saw me earlier even writing SQL, so maybe I can't even say that anymore, although writing it with AI. But yeah, it seems like with AI, including coding, you got to like try and then you find out what was wrong with your original prompt or some component of your app, and then you go and fix it, either starting over the whole thing or just that component.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're in this phase where we're going to be throwing a lot of stuff away. And it's kind of interesting that the oldest component, which is the relational database, is probably going to be the one that sticks here. But I think everything else is going to be stripped off. And if you're putting any time into the other aspects of building an app, probably not good.
So, Brenza, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes, thank you for the seminar. I'm loving all of this. Adam the Thriller Miller. My question stems from just being on topic of just decentralized AI in general. And I don't know if this is a loaded thing because I'm pretty sure we're not there yet, but I've been playing with this whole concept of vibe coding for the last month as a complete novice non-coder. I'm having a blast, but I'm talking to all of these centralized providers. I'm just curious, and I don't know if this is on topic for the broader conversation, but what are your thoughts on where we go from here in terms of decentralized AI? You mentioned that you have a private model on your computer that you use from time to time. How much are you trying to shield your IP effort, everything? Or are you just kind of all bought into where we're at right now as a world? Let's just use the thing so we can understand what's going on as we come in the background and start building out actual decentralized agents.
Yeah, it's an awesome question. You know, the first thing I'll mention is, so I bought a brand new MacBook Pro so that I could run AI models on it. I got 64 gigabytes of RAM. And so I can run the 30, 35 gigabyte models, which are like one level down from like, in a sense, like from a RAM perspective, they're like one.
Which ones are those?
Like Quen is one I've been running. That's the one that ended up working okay for me for programming. But here's the problem. And by the way, there's some that are 2 gigabytes, right? Especially depending on what activity you're doing. You can run on any computer with a GPU, not terribly. But here's the thing, the models are getting so much better so fast. And it probably sounds like a cliche at this point, but like when Opus came out, I think like last Tuesday, like I can practically remember the day, and Sonnet 4, both from Claude, and that's when I started using Claude Code. But like Opus is game changing. And the reason is actually that Opus, they're moving farther and farther away, at least Anthropic is, from just being an LLM. Okay, Opus is an agent, not decentralized at all. It's an agent that can do a million things, not just talk to itself as an LLM, right? And so that type of thing. And so now when they come out with the next one in 3 months, it's like, I'm going to want to use that. And none of those are going to run locally for almost anybody, right? So what I find myself doing is just all these apps have a configuration option, keep all my data private or share all my data, basically. And I'm checking it to keep it private. And yeah, I'm just trusting it. I'm also super interested in the decentralized side. I guess probably all of us are. But to me, it's more likely to be the agents themselves that will be running in a decentralized manner, hopefully, eventually. But I don't know, coding assistance, maybe even farther behind, because you want it to be the best and you want it to be fast. I mean, think about what we're talking about, these like bug loops where you keep asking the AI to fix it and it goes in a circle and can't fix it. I probably experienced that like once a week or something, but still, give it to one of the more advanced models, it might actually figure it out. Especially tell it, hey, you haven't figured this out in many tries. Please think through it in detail. Give it to one of the most advanced models. It'll probably figure it out.
Would you say that the issue is not the models, but the hardware?
Yeah, it's the complexity of providing this type of service and hardware at scale. I think these companies like Claude are, you know, they talk about it, and I think it's really true. They are so busy trying to keep up with demand and improving their core models and APIs, right? That it's like they can barely focus on anything else. I think it's why, you know, a lot of these big companies aren't even doing that much with their UI. I mean, maybe it seems like they are, but the UI is always behind the latest models by 3 to 6 months. If you're using like ChatGPT, if you go to ChatGPT, some of their most powerful models are not even available. But if you go to platform.openai.com and get an API and then sign up and pay per use, you can use any of their models.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm finding that decentralized inference is an uncomfortable middle point. If you want the best models, you go to the centralized guys. If you want privacy, you can build your own, you know, hardware that runs the open source models. And I think that's actually going to be a pretty common configuration for people who do trading. They'll have local MCP tools. We have all these local APIs now with them, the way MCP is set up to feed AI that we didn't have in the SaaS era. So it's actually a lot easier to do everything locally. It's kind of unclear. You would think that decentralized inference would fit with sort of medium-sized models, you know, because it takes a while to take those big models and do what's called distillation and sort of all these open source tricks, for instance, that DeepSeek does, you know, to make a model you could run on your desktop. It takes a while to do that distillation, and certainly that's a process, right? That anything that comes out in the big model does get squeezed down and made more efficient. The problem is that you can also get the same effect by just going to a gateway that will switch your query to the cheapest, fastest model that can answer it. So I talked yesterday with the CEO of Requesty. Requesty is this, you know, gateway to models. You know, you put the Requesty URL in, and they'll route you to whichever of these centralized inference models that you want. What they've done, and some of them are like Claude 4 is 20 times more expensive than Google Flash, which is 20 times more expensive than Qwen. But what they've done is they've actually trained a model and, you know, done some clustering so that they can look at your query and figure out which model to route it to. That's going to be way more efficient even than like switching to your own in-house hardware sort of at the right time. So, you know, that's a step change to me in how that process of making it smaller, cheaper, faster works. And, you know, we're going to collaborate with those guys on trying to do the same thing with these, you know, huge batches of MCP tools, getting you the automatic routing. That's what I'm seeing.
So, yeah, I would, we got one more question, and then, you know, I'd like to hear from DAIAA, you know, who's also been doing vibe coding, and he's probably the, you know, the least training in being a programmer, which is probably like a lot of people on the call. But Adam, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Lou. Question for Adam, from Adam.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you ran into any issues with the when you're using the AI coding tool, where it kind of forgets a previous requirement that you'd asked it for earlier. Like, I want x equals 3, and then you ask it about different questions, different problems, and then to fix a later problem, it can fix it by changing the value of x. I know GitHub Copilot has the Copilot instructions MD file. You can include like consistent system prompt information. But do newer models just have a large enough context window where it's not an issue, or what do you see about that?
Still an issue. I love this comparison or this analogy I heard from Andre something, who was the head of AI at Tesla. He has a lot of good YouTube videos if you really want to understand how this stuff works, like under the covers. But he says that working with an AI coding assistant or whatever, the stuff we're talking about, it's like working with a PhD level, incredibly fast computer scientist / software developer who joins your company 1 minute ago, every single time you ask it a question. And I think that's a great analogy. And so all these tools are being built to try to address that, not the model, not the LLMs. I don't think today that's not something that LLMs really do. You've got to include it in the custom instructions, like you said, and almost all these tools have something like that. If you're using the IDE, they also have something like that, but you still can always, you can also have like a rules file that you choose when to include, or that it chooses when to include. So they're trying to find ways to like make it easier, and then building these things to automatically try to do stuff like that. But yeah, still any LLM, like that's why they always say start a new chat as soon as it's a good time, because you've like finished the current thing, or even if you can't get it finished, start a new chat. And it's like you're starting over until it looks at your code base again, looks at your rules that or custom instructions or knowledge, as Lovable calls it. Yeah, so still something really important to do with almost all of these.
If
Yeah,
I could
and by
just
the way,
comment that the people who are really good at this, who do like vibe coding at the, you know, I do it, I get 50,000 a week doing vibe coding, and I spend 5,000 on inference. There's a bunch of guys like that. They use Rue Code, which is this like a version of VS Code that you can customize to compress the context. So what happens is if the context is long, the AI only remembers the last part of it. And they actually have tools that will summarize and compress the context sort of built into that. So, but that's only if you get really advanced, you worry about that.
and by the way, Adam, if you want to take it to the next level, just look into tokens and context windows more. And you can consider anything you tell your AI is going into its context window. I mean, with the exception of some of this more advanced stuff, you might hear vector databases and stuff. But if you're actually just trying to give it the exact content, you can kind of think about maybe like 20 to 40,000 tokens is always fine, which is like probably half that many words or 2/3 that many words. Twice that is okay with the best model. I'm curious actually if Andy or others would disagree. Twice that is going to be good with the best models. Anything higher and you're getting risky.
Yeah, I think 4.1 has a limit of 128K tokens, I think.
Yeah, right. So that I wouldn't go more than even like 5 to 10, 15, 20. Which one's that you said?
I think it was GPT 4.1, I think had up there, or some others, or
Surprised me, but
or
could
even
be.
or one. Yeah.
Yeah, could be, yeah. But most of them are up to like Claude is at like 250,000-ish, and I think that's by far the lowest for the leading models, get up to like 1 million. But I don't think people, but then you got to save a lot for it to actually do its work. And I think people still think that even the one with 1 million context window starts to get confused once it's a quarter or half built potentially. By the way, what I've seen the AIs do more often than forget something is do something I didn't ask for. And mostly Lovable. Maybe Replit. I haven't seen that as much with the local ones, but like it'll remember something that I didn't want it to, as much as it'll forget something that I wanted it to remember.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. So, DAIAA, you want to add on to the perspective of someone who's even less of a programmer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a good context to start from. So I've been in tech for a very long time, but never really as a programmer. I mean, I, like Adam, did some elementary sort of studying or programming, Java, HTML. So I think the important thing, but I've done a lot of project management, a lot of program management. I've worked for IBM and various other companies like that in the past. But I think the important context in that sense is that, firstly, vibe coding generally is simply about logic. It's just about reason. And so, and not mathematics in that sense, just simple logic. A plus B equals C. So if you kind of have that framework, so you really have to think logically about how you go about structuring your work. And, as both Adam and Andy said, using AIs to structure your prompts to get advice on how to set yourself up is a great place to start. I think the thing that I have found with vibe coding, and, Andy made a really great point about, how being familiar with being a programmer can be a hindrance. And I work with a lot of students, computer science students now, for example, and it really is a challenge to get them to understand that you have to think differently when you get into vibe coding. And, I think it's all in the name when they call it vibe coding, which is whoever came up with that, genius, really, because it is very much about a frequency. So the first thing is as well that, and you'll find this, that there are many tools and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. I would even almost go as far as to say personalities. You know, the way that they respond and behave is very different. And of course, Lovable, and it's part to do with the models that they use and the way that they're structured as well. It's not just the models, it's also about how they're structured in terms of, you know, their tool flows, because they're agentic. They're not just LLMs, they are agents. And so in this sense, they've been coded with a framework of operating. And so there's a lot about getting into that vibe. It's kind of, you know, the theme is getting into that flow state. And that's a really important part of it. But, you know, you have to, and that's also about you. It's also about what works with you, what you connect with, because it's kind of a bit of a reflection. But there is a bit of a process you need to go through to match yourself with different tools and understand what they do well. As an example, you know, I used Manus the other day, which is an agent, and it's more of a research agent, and I used it to generate report. Manus is great at generating reports. You know, you can do deep research and go and generate a report. And it also does coding as well. You can ask it to do coding. And it's okay at coding, but, you know, it's kind of like a Microsoft Windows programmer versus an Apple iOS programmer in that sense. So you get a very different kind of look and feel. Lovable is very creative-led. It gives you a very design-led feel. I'm a big fan of Windsurf. You know, Curse is a little bit more deep dev orientated. It's kind of, they're on par, but it's just the interface and the mechanic of how it works is slightly different in that sense. So I think that's one thing. You know, vibe coding, agentic AI is revolutionary. And by this time next year, it's going to be a very different scenario whereby everybody, you know, it's kind of like everyone's a cypherpunk because cypherpunk code, right? You know, what do cypherpunks do? They code. So everyone's a cypherpunk because everyone can code. But there is a lot of frustration that comes in where we are today as well. You know, you can spend hours and hours and hours, and that part of that is kind of familiarizing yourself with these processes. So one thing that I do, for example, that is really helpful is I try and copy my prompts and put them in a notepad, and have a list of all my prompts, because often you will have to throw stuff away, or you will have to start again, or you will fork what you've done and then reproduce it again. So having a record of all your prompts is really important. What's also really important is to get the agent, when you crack a problem, to tell you how it cracked the problem and to document it so that when you encounter that problem again, it can know what to do. You can give it direction. You know, there's so many of those error loops that you will go around for. I mean, it can be days. It can literally, you can go around loops for days and not come out of it. I mean, we're in the middle of one at the moment on an MCP connection. And the problem that really comes is that once you go down that path, it's very hard for a developer to come in and identify where the problem is, because they spit out such vast amounts of code that it's really hard for a normal. This is why you get a lot of pushback from traditional developers on using vibe coding or auditing vibe coding files, because it's very hard to get your head wrapped around that. And there is a whole new approach that you need to get into. I think there's a new class of developer that's going to emerge, you know, starting this year, but certainly by next year. By this time next year, there will be a really big difference between being a traditional developer and a AI-assisted developer. In that sense, you'll have to think differently. You'll have to learn how to orchestrate these agents and understand their strengths and weaknesses and coordinate them. That's where the effort is going to move to in the future. But I think, yeah, in the short term, it's really about you've got to kind of develop these processes around tracking what you're doing and saving constantly. You know, with Lovable, that's publishing and doing stuff and putting stuff out there in that sense.
Okay, cool. Alex?
Yeah, fascinating conversation. Thank you, DAIAA. Of course, everything you say always makes me think ahead. I want to say that what I'm taking away from this conversation, which is very different than what I thought it was when I said, okay, tutorial for vibe coding. Okay, I'll know how to vibe code by 1 o'clock, is actually what I feel that vibe coding or vibe coders will be that branch of what makes really decentralized AI conscious, because it's the historicity that makes us who we are conscious. Because we remember our memories, we are who we are. It's because we have all those experiences that happen throughout our life who constitute who we are. I think that AI in itself cannot be conscious, not even AGI or ASI. We can talk a little bit about that, but as someone who has studied and has a PhD in the studies of phenomenology and consciousness, I want to say that the strongest I want to say model that explains consciousness, an integration informatics, really speaks about the importance of memory and the importance of historicity. And so if we use blockchain as that genesis block that says, okay, here are all my prompts or all my memories or all the things that I've done that are not just a list of actions, but actually a crystallization of our intentions of who we are as human beings, then we talk about that through reputation and behavior and whatnot. I think that actually vibe coders will be the ones who will instill consciousness in decentralized AI. So I just wanted to leave that thought that
Cool.
we're going to get something that we totally did not expect. Walking in saying, sure, that'll make me now be able to be a cyberpunk or a coder, but actually what I'm actually doing is I'm helping create artificial consciousness.
Look, that's a great, phenomenal way of phrasing it. And I want to talk a couple of things that are really important there. So Andy mentioned the part about relational databases and that they are the things that persist. I believe that what's going to emerge is the blockchains become these databases. That's essentially really what blockchains essentially are. They're distributed databases. And I think this is the foundation of really where this convergence between blockchain and these systems come. And I think, Alex, you actually really hit on a really important point, because I think this is, and you see this particularly in agentic AI, the need for decentralized infrastructure with agentic AI is non-debatable. It's non-negotiable, it's non-debatable, it's inevitable. It's the definition of agency. So there's a vector that we're going on in that sense that, for the first time, blockchain doesn't have to justify itself in terms of the use case when it comes to agentic AI. But I think you're also touching on something that's really there's a journey to what you're talking about, Alex, this sort of hybrid space where there's this new kind of platform for consciousness, social consciousness that's facilitated by this. But I think the other thing that's really important in this intermediary stage, and this is something as a vibe coder that you'll find as well, because a lot of the tools are generative AI. One of the things with generative AI is that it never repeats the same answer twice. It's not deterministic. So the interface is very fluid. You can't be anchored to an interface in the way that we have done previously, because it will just, if you ask the same agent or the same vibe coding platform to design the same application twice, it will design something not completely different, but different each time. You will not get the same result. And this can be frustrating sometimes because you really like a design that it came up with, and then how do you get back to it? You can't, often is the case, unless you kind of go.
But like with human beings, you ask me you'll ask me to repeat what I said, I will be incapable of repeating it. I'll say something like it, but I won't say it.
Exactly.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour. I'm happy letting the conversation continue on, but I know some people are gonna have to hop off. But I'll just leave. This has been super helpful for me, and I'm just I want more of this, and I'm trying to think to make it just a standing thing. And so if anybody else on the call has any thoughts about how we can kind of continue this and move on, whether it can a standing weekly call or something else, because I know personally I'm going to go and start coding and start doing it, and I can only imagine that that's going to engender a whole massive new set of questions. And I think the one thing that probably everybody on this call is we all want to learn, right? We're all curious, we all want to learn, and how should we best organize ourselves to optimize for that? I'd love everybody's feedback.
Yeah, I did actually, and I was talking about this yesterday. I think what we actually should organize is like a vibe jam session, and we probably need about 2 hours, and maybe once a month, whereby everybody starts and people just come with their problems, with a very clear, defined set of what's the problem that you are encountering when you are vibe coding? And we compare, we get an agent to bring all of these problems together, and what we probably need is some strong developers, but there are a couple of in this group already who can talk about those specific types of problems, how to solve them, and because those become the real blockers that can drive you mad, and you can lose hours and cycles of payments as well with platforms like Lovable, because every prompt has a cost as well. So
how they get you.
I think that's, and then they all have different models, but that is one real thing you have to pay attention to, this efficiency of your cycles, which is why you use agents to kind of prepare your prompts and prepare yourself. As you really do want to try and get as close to what they call one shot as possible, whereby you've got it all laid out, because the chances are if you lay it out properly and it's a contained enough task, the agent is going to come up with something that you'll be pretty happy with. And it's when you start tinkering with it where the problems start, where things start to potentially fall apart. Well, that's what I would suggest, a vibe jam that we do like once a month with a couple of hours, and we kind of get some developers to help us debug and address specific problems that people are encountering.
Are we talking in real life? Because I've actually been to a couple of them in real life where it was out of some VC's office, and I think that's a good idea. If we have something in real life, we all get together and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as New Yorkers, certainly has an appeal, of course. I think probably both.
New York again.
Probably both. I mean, and there's strengths and weaknesses of both approaches. Agreed, but I think there's probably. I think we have to experiment. I think we have to experiment with both.
No, you're right. We have to do online and maybe in person. I forget this is not a local audience. Sorry.
There are a lot of New Yorkers, I'm sure, more than any other place, but it is global.
Good place to start, though.
So cool. So does anybody else? Yeah, it's obviously been an awesome conversation. Thanks, Adam, again for leading it. And anybody else have anything that they want to mention, ask, or before we sign off?
Adam, were you in New York or were you?
No, Southern California. And maybe just my quick note is remember that these things can take time. It's not time of you sitting typing, it's time waiting or watching. And so that can make it fun to do lots of things at once, but that can make it hard. Like if you guys told me, okay, let's do a sit down for 1 hour and just show us how to make something, that wouldn't be that interesting, I don't think, because it would keep saying, okay, I'm working for 5 minutes. But I think a 2 to 3 hour session where everyone there is kind of working and like helping share ideas or answer questions, I think that could be really good.
Just FYI, among other things, Adam hosts Crypto Mondays, Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of hands up, by the way. I just noticed that.
So Lena, I think you're next, and Jorge.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you so much for this just amazing tutorial, Adam and everyone. And yeah, I totally agree with DAIAA that coding is about logic if you're a coder. But what if you are a manager, an owner, an entrepreneur of your own project? For me, vibe coding is the only chance to make my project live. And I'm so grateful that AI exists in my AI agent development, because I'm a solo founder, I'm a solo developer, I'm a solo entrepreneur. So vibe coding saved my life. And I've launched 2 artificial intelligence agents by myself on Telegram and on WhatsApp, absolutely solo, just vibe coding. So I will be grateful if you welcome me, how DAIAA mentioned about that jam tutorial or something like that, where I can participate, because managers, they have ideas, they have control, and they have government. But coders, they have logic. But vibe coding is about unity of all of this in one combination. And I'm a live example that it is possible. You see that I'm a woman. It's rare to see somebody like me. So I will be short. I just want to thank you guys for giving me the chance to be in DAIAA.
It's a pleasure, Lena. Thanks. All right, did you have your hand up? Once, twice? Nope, okay. So great. Anybody else have anything to say before we sign off? Okay, look, this has been great. Again, I appreciate anybody, reach out with any thoughts about how best to continue it. And I think we'll, at the very least, have a follow-up Vibe Jam session. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lou.